Okay, so again, I'll start. Hi, my name's Andy Shelby. I'm currently on the board of SCMA. I have the pleasure of introducing our next session, which is titled Building and Investing in the Professionalism of Mediation, presented by the organization MC3. The mediation profession continues to grow and mature, and MC3 is a leader and at the forefront of this journey. So this session will be jointly presented by Jack Getz and Jason Harper. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Jack Getz, who's the current president of MC3 and also was a past president of SCMA in 2018. So
well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Andy. And thank you to everybody at SCMA for allowing us this time to present. Andy, I don't know if my screen sharing is enabled, but
yes, here we go.
All right, thank you so much. Well, it's always hard to follow in the footsteps of KMC. I think they are just a wonderful organization, and they make us think a lot about investing in the future of mediation. Our presentation, though, I would say also talks about investing in the future of mediation, but also has a second purpose, and that's investing in yourself. And so when we talk about MC3, please understand that we are a nonprofit organization that was formed out of the SCMA. Eight years ago, we started as a committee for the SCMA. And the people operating MC3, I mean, I can't say enough about the four people who have been with me from the last 4 years who have just done tremendous work in bringing MC3 to you. Including Jason Harper, who's here with me today, Victoria Gray, who I believe is online with us, Lynn Johnson and Adam Ravitch, all members of our community who have really worked hard. And I think last night's announcement, for those of you who weren't there, that AAAmediation.org intends to collaborate with MC3 beginning in January, and that MC3 certified mediators will now be able to serve on the AAA affiliate panel is a big step for us. And so I appreciate all the hard work that everybody else did. And just really thank you all for attending this presentation and finding out more about MC3. A lot of you have, of course, probably seen presentations of ours in the past. So we have a little bit shorter time period now, so we're going to truncate some of it. But I did just, want to go back and talk about some of the basics. So let me just share our slide set. And maybe, there we go. Okay, so again, SCMA has had a large hand in developing MC3. I would say Jason and I, as former presidents, of SCMA, really had a lot to do with it. But we've had Floyd Siegel, Barbara Brown. We've had a tremendous amount of contributions from other former presidents in making this happen. And I think just to take a step back, why is that the case? I mean, the whole point of MC3 is to expand the use of mediation. The theory is that as long as mediation is a field and not a profession, and I could deliver a whole subject on that, but let's just take it that it's not in the Business and Professions Code in the state of California and is not considered a profession in and of itself. The direct contact outside of a few select areas like family law, the direct contact between disputants and mediators it just doesn't happen. It's mostly a go-between between attorneys and mediators, and they mostly attorneys are the middle people. But part of that is, and it makes a natural sense that it would be, is that there's no public quality assurance for mediators. And MC3 was built on the proposition that if we can create public quality assurance for mediators, a voice that the disputants would trust in the community, we can expand the use of mediation throughout our communities because we could have more direct contact. We all know there's thousands of disputes there that are left unresolved all the time. Some of them end up in small claims court. We've seen plenty of those. But really, as we've all answered this calling, and our love would be fulfilled, I think, if we were on speed dial, if a dispute came up, and not the the attorney around the corner. So, and I'm not disparaging attorneys because I'm one of them, but I still think that a lot of conflicts could be resolved well before they end up in court and otherwise. As SCMA presidents, we all hear the same thing, and again, I just post this up there. It's just a couple things that have happened over the time. We don't get the respect we deserve. I'm tired of everybody expecting us to give away our services for free. And, your common experience, you've ever done any small claims hearings or civil harassment or anything like that, would be nobody knows what a mediator really does. You have to get up in front of the court in some courthouses, or the hearing officer or the bailiff has to explain exactly what mediation is. And yet you could probably talk to most of those disputants and they could tell you what a nurse does. They could probably tell you, what an accountant does. It wouldn't be exact, but it would be close enough. But mediators might not be much different than meditators to them. And so, the reality, and some of us are meditators at the same time, I'm sure. But the reality is this is all connected. And the connecting point is this: we haven't ever staked out a ground as a formalized profession. And MC3 is an effort for us to stake out a ground to tell the public what we stand for. And as a result, hopefully expand the use of mediation going forward. So they're all connected. What makes a profession? And, a lot has gone into this. A benefit of publishing an article in 2014 with my now wife, Jennifer Kalsbeck, who's a sociologist, who we went through a lot of the precepts to building a profession. And most professions, when you think about it, if you think about just attorneys, accountants, doctors, nurses, whatever profession you might want to take, it's often keyed to education and often linked to a degree. Okay. There is undoubtedly a binding ethics code to be a profession. All professions are self-governing. In other words, you have to have a way of keeping out the non-quality practitioners. All professions key into some kind of continuing education, so people keep current in the field. And then, of course, for some professions, we know there's licensure, which is often state regulated. That's certainly not what MC3 is. And there will be a test with that licensure. And of course, now you look at it, currently mediation does not require any of the above. And so it's not difficult to link the fact that there's no real public knowledge about mediation with the lack of formalization about what we do. Art Hinshaw, who's the leader of the clinic at Arizona State University, a very well-known professor in the mediation field, published an article in the Harvard Negotiation Law Review back in spring of 2016. And the article, it's titled Regulating Mediators, which is a little scary because he was proposing something much more than what MC3 is doing, which is voluntary mediator certification. But he was proposing regulation, but he pointed out that 60% of workers in the United States are either licensed or certified in some way to do what they do. And mediation's in the other 40%. And when you think about it, how can we expect the public to want to invest directly into it? And again, I'll grant to all of you that in some areas like family law, it has worked out differently. But we know that is a small part of the disputes that could be resolved. Well, we certainly stand on the shoulders of giants. MC3 didn't invent the wheel on this. There's been a lot of work done on certification well prior to when MC3 launched in 2019. And one of the most informative pieces was done by the ABA Dispute Resolution Section and their task force report in 2012. They didn't take a position on whether a certification agency for mediators should be created, but they did take a position that if it were created, it should do the following. And then they also took the position it should not do the following. And quite frankly, although we've been informed by other task force reports like ACR, Association for Conflict Resolution, also did a task force report that has influenced our work, the reality of it is we've anchored ourselves to the ABA task force report. We found it convincing and compelling and based upon a lot of research from great luminaries in the field. So again, in their task force report, they go that the certification, if there's such a thing as certification, it should clearly define the skills, knowledge, and values which persons with credentials must possess. And indeed, if you went to, and I'll be followed by my colleague, Jason Harper, who will go through a lot of exactly what the skills, knowledge, and values are, and they're clearly on our site. Ensure that candidates have training adequate to instill those skills, knowledge, and values. And again, yes, we require training and education as part of what MC3 does. Here's the big key and the real difference maker for MC3. Sit back for a second and think about, why would AAA mediation.org want to ally with MC3? And if you ask them, they would say it's number 3 is a big part of it. Be administered by an organization distinct from the organization which trains the candidate. So again, I can speak entirely as a professor in this regard. It's somewhat of a no-brainer to deliver a class and then certify all of you have learned everything I have taught and give you a certificate. That doesn't take a lot to do. And I'm not obviously criticizing the classes I give and others in the community. But what MC3 does is we don't deliver the education for the certificate. We work collaboratively with educational organizations all across the country, including AAAmediation.org, to try to find some basic principles that they all support and then validate those through our certification process and recertification process. So again, we don't provide the education for MC3 certification. We rely upon the community to do that, and they've been doing a wonderful job. The ABA report goes on, have an assessment process capable of determining with consistency whether candidates possess the defined skills, knowledge, and values. As Jason Harper will lay out, our assessment process is not easy. It's fairly complicated to take in the robust nature of our mediation field, but we do believe it determines with consistency whether people possess these values. Explain clearly a person's likely to rely on its credential what is being certified. And that, again, we strive to do through our website and our other publications. Here's another key that AAA would tell you would be a reason. Provide an accessible, transparent system to register complaints against credentialed mediators. Promptly and fairly investigate complaints, and if appropriate, decredential a mediator who fails to comply with the standards. All MC3 certified mediators, now going, we have several dozen in 5 different states, all have signed on to an ethics code. They all agree to give out a quality assurance paragraph in their paperwork that essentially allows someone to complain about the mediation if they violated an ethics principle. Fortunately, in our 2 years, we've never handled one single complaint, and that's much to the credit of the mediators we're credentialing. ABA task force went on. What should an effective credentialing program not do? Should not operate as mandatory licensing. MC3 is not trying to operate as mandatory licensing, as I explained. We're not state involved. We're a voluntary mediator certification organization serving our MC3 certified mediators and serving the public. We shouldn't bar non-lawyers from becoming credentialed. Clearly, that's not it. In fact, if you go through the MC3 certified mediator roster already, it's a robust group of lawyers and non-lawyers. Over 80% of our credentialed mediators have either a law degree or an advanced degree in dispute resolution. So it's really a great group of people. Or we should not bar the students from selecting a non-credentialed mediator. Obviously, we have not done that. So in a lot of senses, we've already set out to do what we had hoped to do. Part of our hope was to raise the level of education and training amongst mediators in the community. From a formalized profession, as I mentioned at the outset, oftentimes the education is linked to a degree. MC3 is not. It hasn't been recognized yet in the field. Obviously, there are programs locally, Pepperdine, USC, Cal State Dominguez Hills, that have master's programs in conflict resolution, LLMs and ADR. So at some point in the future, it may become important for the field to have a degree linked to them. At this point, we accept people with and without degrees. The people with degrees do have to have less hours of mediation training. They get credit for their degree. The people, obviously, who have not had formalized education would have to establish just more mediation training. Binding ethics code. We use the AAA, ABA, ACR ethics code that's been in existence, and everybody signs off on that. We also use the rules of court for the local jurisdiction in which you're in. So if they have an ethics code and you're completing or hearing a litigated case, you would be bound by the local ethics code. Self-governing, and that's our quality assurance process, our ethics complaint process. Continuing education, keeping current in the field, yes. All MC3 certified mediators are required to put in 20 hours over 3 years, but the 20 hours are accomplished wonderfully through organizations like SCMA. And as you've heard the director say earlier, everybody will receive a completion certificate at this conference, and it will note that the education you're receiving can be used for certification or recertification as an MC3 certified mediator. And if licensure often a test, we are not about licensure. We work with the California Judicial Council. They provide an ethics program. It functions as a pseudo test because it won't let you pass unless you get the right answer, but you're allowed multiple guesses. So everybody has passed. But it does share the ethics compliance part, and it does function as a test for us currently. That's my part. I encourage you to listen closely to Jason, my colleague, and ask us questions afterwards. But we hope the announcement last night by AAA mediation.org will inspire some of you to take a harder look at MC3 if you haven't already. And we really look forward to having you join us. Jason?
All right, I'll take it from here, Jack. Thank you very much. If you'll allow me to share my screen, and I can kind of go through what some of the qualifications that would be necessary to be an MC3 certified mediator. So again, thank you very much to Jack and everyone that has been a part of MC3 up to now. You know, it's been a very, very wild ride, but we're going in a very, very positive direction, particularly with the collaboration with AAAmediation.org. So Jack kind of gave you the theory of mediation as a profession and why it's a field and why it's going to turn into a profession, you know, one reason of which being MC3. So with that in mind, I want to talk with you a little bit about some of the qualifications that go into being an MC3 certified mediator. There's quite a few things here, but the spirit of this is, you know, one of the things that we found with mediators is, you know, the public generally views mediators as or they've seen mediators come in that have had a number of years of experience in a whole other field, in a whole other, you know, occupation, and then taking, you know, the 40-hour mediation training course or you know, a 35 hours, something along those lines. But for MC3 certified mediators, we want the focus to be on an education in mediation. So with that in mind, let's go through the qualifications. Now, the qualifications process refers to 200 total points, right? And that's required for the initial certification. And there's 3 components that comprise those 200 total points. One is the education component, another is the mediation experience component, and then finally the professional activity and continuing professional development component. Now, there are 40 total points as detailed in the professional activity and continuing professional development component. Those are required to maintain the MC3 certification every 3 years. So again, every 3 years, you are required to fulfill those 40 points. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that as we move forward. But I think we want to focus on those first 3 components: the education, mediation experience, and then the professional activity. So from the education component standpoint, MC3 is requiring 80 hours of mediation specific training from organizations acceptable to MC3. And there are a number of them out there. If you go on our website, we list a huge number of them. And so what we've done is we've taken a look at the syllabus for each of those programs. And in that syllabus, if it covers the basic elements of a mediation training, and we go into that in detail on the website, then we would say that it is acceptable, that training is acceptable to MC3. Now, a minimum of 25 of those hours must be completed from a discrete program that covers the basics on how to conduct a mediation. What does that mean? That means at least one of those programs that you took for mediation training has to be 25 hours, right? So that should explain that. You can't do 8 10-hour mediation trainings. That doesn't necessarily add up, but we want at least one of those training sessions to be at least 25 hours. Now, we have a certain tidbit because we have reached Virginia, and so we wanted to kind of make something specific for them in the Commonwealth. And one of the things that we did was, we made an addendum that says that candidates who have met the requirements established by the Judicial Council of Virginia to receive referrals will be deemed to have met that minimum 25-hour requirement. Now, obviously, this is SCMA, but we wanted to always make that clear for our fine folks and colleagues in the Commonwealth. So when we talk about that 80 hours of mediation-specific training, there are ways to offset that particular amount of training. Now, one of those ways to offset them are by degrees. So we have degrees that could add to the point total. So, and it goes by, how closely you are related to potentially, mediation training. So we go down the line and we'll start at the top. So if you have a postgraduate degree in conflict resolution from a nationally or regionally accredited institution, you get 40 points, knocked off right off the bat, right? So now you would have to only do a 40-hour mediation training if you had a post-grad degree in conflict resolution, all right? Now, if that particular post-grad degree in conflict resolution included a mediation course, then all 80 points are fulfilled, all right? Because the purpose is to really emphasize mediation education in the art and the occupation of mediation. And then also, if you have a first professional degree in law, whether it's a JD or an LLM, or a PhD in any discipline from a nationally or regionally accredited institution, that would amount to 30 points that could add to your point total. So if there's an 80-point total and you have a JD or an LLM or a PhD, that would offset 30 points, and now you would only need 50. And it goes down the line from there. If you have a master's degree, that amounts to 25. If you have a bachelor's, that amounts to 20. And if you have an associate's degree, that amounts to 10. So again, this education component is really there to help you offset the amount of points that you would need for mediation-specific training, with a real emphasis on degrees in conflict resolution, because that is what we do. Now, as far as the time component, you could have gotten the education at any point. There's no time limit for the education component, and from a degree standpoint. Okay, so I just want to make sure that that is clear. Next is the completion of a distance learning course on mediator ethics. And that is what Jack was talking about earlier with the Judicial Council. The Administrative Office of the Court has allowed MC3 to use their program on mediator ethics, and all candidates or all applicants for MC3 certification will be required to take this distance learning course. And that also, amounts to 30 points right there. Another element in the education component is a minimum 3-hour litigation nuts and bolts training from a single provider. Now, that provider may be the same one used to complete the 25-hour requirement that we stated earlier, or it could be a different provider. But that curriculum has to include legal terminology, the litigation process, and the rules and all applicable procedures. And the candidates who have earned a JD or an LLM would have obviously be deemed to have met that particular requirement. However, in order to be exempt from that litigation nuts and bolts training without a JD or an LLM, you have to show proof of performing at least 10 litigated case mediations at the limited and unlimited level jurisdiction, not including civil harassment. So a 3-hour litigation nuts and bolts training would be required unless you have those specific exemptions. So that takes us away from the education component, and now we're in the mediation experience component, because one of the major and most important aspects that MC3 certified mediators have is that experience, right? How else can we be that gold standard if we don't have the experience to back it up, right? So we're combining the theory into the practice. So with that in mind, the mediation experience component is as follows. You need to show proof of your mediation experience, which is a minimum of 10 cases mediated or co-mediated, and you get 1 point per hour mediated and a half a point per hour if you did it within a co-mediation. Now, the minimum amount of points that you would need to qualify in this particular component is 30, but it's a maximum of 50 points. That's 50 points is the maximum for this entire mediation experience component. Now, in order to display that you have that experience, you must attach a list of cases, and you'll be asked to provide detail on your role in the mediation, as well as the dates and the length of time for each of those cases. Now, this will all be given under, and you'll be required to affirm all these mediations under the pain and penalty of perjury. But again, this is the proof to show that you do indeed have that mediation experience. And there are other ways to accomplish that. And one of the other ways is by mediation support and or ancillary activities that are acceptable to MC3 with a mediator provider organization. Now, for those of you that have been a part of those DERPA organizations and who've done great work in helping so many mediators get that experience, whether it was mediating just straight up, or in a co-mediation, or in mediation support, we want to honor that. So you get a point for, in this particular aspect for mediation support, you get a point for every 2 hours of support that you have provided. Now, what do those support roles include? It could include mediation observation. It could include case management, case intake or convening, and facilitations, conciliations, mentoring, and shout out to Kids Managing Conflict, peer mediation. All right. Now, candidates intending to qualify for those points available in this category, you will have to submit a letter from your supervisor validating each role and that particular experience. Now, in this particular section, there is a maximum of 20 points allowed. So you can't just get your entire mediation experience component fulfilled just by doing mediation support. You have to be in that seat. You have to be the one mediating. And so it's a maximum of 20 points allowed here. And just so we're clear, purely administrative tasks would not qualify. And essentially we define, as MC3, we define administrative tasks as clerical tasks where there's no direct contact with the mediator or the parties. Okay, so that is the mediation experience component. And we definitely want to acknowledge and embrace all the different types of mediation. There's no one specific area of mediation that we're looking for. There's no one specific style of mediation that we're looking for. That's the beauty of MC3. It's really about presenting yourself as a mediator that is trained and that has done the work and as we go into this next category, continuing the work and continuing the education. So that brings us to the professional activity component. Now, there are 40 points required of all candidates when we talk about the professional activity. And these activities must have been completed in the 5 years immediately prior to applying for the initial certification. And the requirements must then be met every 3 years after you qualify for mediator certification. And every 3 years you have to show that you've gotten all of these 40 points all over again. Why is this important? It's important because as mediators, as qualified mediators, we need to stay sharp, right? One of the standards that we need to hold ourselves to and hold ourselves accountable for is making sure that we maintain our edge in the field, maintain our education, make sure that we stay as current as we possibly can. And this component speaks to that particular endeavor. So let's talk about those 40 points. The first is training that enhances the practice of mediation from organizations acceptable to MC3, and you get 1 point per hour. It's a maximum of 20 points, right? That's the professional activity component. And at least 1.5 of those points must come from attending a mediation ethics program. We have to keep that going. And then, candidates may prove their education with transcripts, certificates, and or other proof of training acceptable to MC3, much like in the education component. If you have the 80 hours of mediation training, or you have the degree to offset the hours of mediation training, we need to see those transcripts, certified transcripts. We need to see the certificates and other proof of training. So to be clear, initial certification candidates, you can use the training hours from the education component to satisfy this particular requirement. However, that training that you want to use in the education component and use again in the professional activity component, it has to be within the last 5 years. All right. Otherwise, it does not count. It'll count towards your initial education, the education component. It will count towards that, but it will not count towards a professional activity if that particular certification or if that particular training wasn't done within the last 5 years. The other aspect is, a professional activity and professional development is membership in professional societies or organizations relevant to mediation. Now, there's a maximum of 10 points, and this category includes, but is not limited to, the ADR sections of various bars and associations, SCMA, have to say that first and foremost, but also NAFCOM, ACR, CDRC, a number of other organizations, and there are great organizations that are relevant to mediation, SCMA being the prime one here. So having membership to those professional organizations is something that, again, keeps you current in the field. It keeps you active in the community. We want our certified mediators to do that. Also, if you have any published mediation articles or conference presentations, that are relevant to mediation, you get a maximum of 10 points for that as well. Now, while not all articles or presentations may be accepted to satisfy this standard, the training that is an enhancement on the core content in the education component would presumptively qualify. So if you have published articles or if you've done conference presentations, bring them in within your application, and if they are deemed acceptable, they will be counted up to a maximum of 10 points, and you get 5 points per article or conference presentation. Also, if you have received an award for professional contributions to mediation or mediator accomplishments, you get 5 points per award with a maximum of 10. Now, to be clear, an award for participation in a program would not qualify. Sorry, but that is the decree there. And then also teaching. If you are teaching in a university conflict resolution program or a law school ADR course or a training that is recognized by MC3, you would get a maximum of 10 points for that and 5 points for each training. So that is something else that we want to make sure that we recognize, from an academic standpoint. If you're teaching people how to be mediators or how to become better mediators, we absolutely want to honor that. And then absolutely, we need to have there's other professional activity components that have the proof of mediations, right? So if you are doing the work. If you are actively mediating, there's a maximum of 20 points, and the candidates, again, you have to attach a list of cases, and you'll be asked to provide detail. Now, again, if you want to count the mediations that you did in your professional activity component, which is part 2, then if the mediation was done within the last 5 years, you can count it here. So that absolutely does count. And again, it's a minimum of 10 cases mediated or co-mediated, with 1 point per hour mediated and a half point per hour in co-mediation. Again, and you have to attach a list of those cases, and we'll be asked to provide detail of your role in the mediation, the dates, and the length of time. So if we're going to do the mediation activity from, actively doing mediations, we have to include the mediation support, much like in the, in the actual performance component. We are honoring mediation support, and that's a maximum of 20 points allowed as well. And we talked about, some of the support roles that would qualify, and some of the ones that would not. Again, those clerical tasks or purely administrative tasks would not qualify. And again, you need a letter from your supervisor confirming that you in fact did this, and submit that to MC3. So to bring it all to a close, I know that we've got few minutes left, but to bring it all to a close, if you're looking at the baseline qualifications for MC3 certified mediators, there's the education component, right, which is 80 hours of mediation training, with 25 of those hours being from one discrete training program. There's the performance component, which is 10 cases mediated, spanning a minimum of 50 hours. And then finally, the professional activity component, which is 40 points total from various activities in the last 5 years, and then 20 hours of training, including an hour and a half of ethics in the last 5 years, and then the same every 3 years after your initial certification. So that was all a lot of information all at once, but you are in luck if you missed anything here, because we have a website for you to go to. And if you have any questions, there's email addresses that you can, folks that you can reach out to. But MC3certified.org is the website, and you are absolutely able and free to go to that website and get any other information that you would need or would like in order to start your journey to become an MC3 certified mediator. So again, for more information, please go to our website at www.mc3certified.org. So with that in mind, I want to say thank you to SCMA and the fall conference, and Andy Shelby, I'll kick it right back to you.
Great. So Jack and Jason, it's always a pleasure, and we always appreciate having you on. They have both given me advice and counsel over the years, and I always appreciate it, and really applaud the efforts and the passion and the persistence that you too and your MC3 group is, and leading the efforts for mediators certifications. And congratulations on your collaboration with AAA. That's a big deal. So I know I know this is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and you guys are doing a great job keeping on it. So I'm MC3 certified, to all those out there, so it's a good thing to do. And if you need to, this will be recorded, so if anyone wants to hear some of those tidbits of information, you can listen to it again. So I thank everybody. I'm going to have to end it right now because there's a session about to start for the rest of SCMA conference. So enjoy the rest of the day. And again, Jack and Jason, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.